in one of the greatest mysteries in all of American history. I'm talking about the hunt for the true identity of D.B. Cooper.
After stepping onto a plane under a false name, carrying a briefcase filled with wires, and making a bold demand, D.B. Cooper became the man who kept law enforcement awake for decades.
The FBI embarks on a cross-country mission.
The most chilling part? No one ever knew who he really was, until now. For more than half a century, D.B. Cooper remained the phantom America could never catch. Endless conspiracy theories fueled the mystery.
The dangerous chase continues as agents struggle to end his flight from justice.
But after 54 years, his true identity has finally come to light. How was he unmasked? And what shocking truths are waiting to be revealed? Let's dig in. How could a single man carry out a heist so daring? It left Americans stunned, and investigators endlessly frustrated. With a parachute, a daring escape, and one relentless detective, all signs now point to one individual.
The person behind a 53-year-old hijacking mystery could soon be solved thanks to new evidence.
The mystery is finally unraveling. But to truly understand it, we need to go back to where it all began. Thanksgiving Eve, 1971. It was the day before Thanksgiving, 1971. Airports were packed with travelers eager to get home, and Flight 305 looked like nothing more than a quick hop from Portland to Seattle. Just another ordinary flight, until a man in seat 18C turned it into one of the most baffling mysteries in American history. He called himself Dan Cooper. Dressed in a dark suit, clip-on tie, and sunglasses, he blended in with the crowd. But halfway through that short 30-minute flight, everything changed. Calmly, Cooper handed the flight attendant a folded note. She assumed it was just another passenger slipping her a phone number, until he leaned in and whispered the words that froze her in place. "Miss, you'd better read that note. I have a bomb." Inside, his demands were clear. $200,000 in $20 bills, 4 parachutes, and a fuel truck waiting in Seattle. If not, he'd blow the plane sky high. And when he cracked open his briefcase, showing what looked like dynamite wired to a battery, no one doubted he meant it. The flight crew alerted the cockpit. The pilot radioed a hijack code, and within minutes, the FBI was on the case. By the time the plane landed in Seattle, agents had scrambled to deliver the ransom. Passengers were quietly released, most of them unaware they'd just been part of a hijacking that would become legend. With the money and parachutes handed over, Cooper gave new orders: take off again and head south toward Mexico. Somewhere over the dark, rain-soaked forests of Washington state, he lowered the rear stairs of the Boeing 727 and vanished into the night, jumping with $200,000 strapped to his chest. When the plane landed hours later in Reno, he was gone. The only trace he left behind was a clip-on tie on his seat. The search was massive. Agents, troopers, helicopters, paratroopers, even bloodhounds scoured the forests near the Washougal River. But there was no body, no parachute, no equipment, not even a boot print. It was as if Cooper had melted into the wilderness. To make matters stranger, a reporting error in the media transformed his alias from Dan Cooper to D.B. Cooper. The mistake stuck, cementing him as a legend. Over the years, the FBI chased more than 1,000 suspects. They collected DNA, handwriting samples, and tracked ransom bills. One man even confessed on his deathbed, only to be exposed as a fraud seeking attention. The case seemed destined to remain unsolved. Then, nearly a decade later, a clue surfaced. In 1980, an 8-year-old boy camping with his family near the Columbia River unearthed 3 bundles of decayed $20 bills. Serial numbers proved they matched the ransom money. It was the first and only physical evidence ever recovered. But instead of solving the mystery, it raised new questions. Had Cooper died in the jump, the money carried downstream? Or did he plant it there, taunting the FBI? Investigators scoured the area, searched the river, and tested the bills for clues. Yet no parachute, no gear, and no body were ever found. Just 3 weathered bundles of cash and more unanswered questions. For decades, the FBI kept the case open, labeling it active but cold. But in 2016, after 45 years of chasing dead ends, they officially closed the file, leaving it behind as one of the greatest unsolved crimes in American history. Still, while the trail had gone cold, whispers of new evidence were beginning to surface, ready to crack the mystery wide open. The breakthrough no one saw coming. While the FBI had long abandoned hope of cracking the case, one man refused to let it die. Dan Grider, a retired commercial airline captain with more than 24,000 flight hours, wasn't just any pilot. He was also a YouTuber who loved sharing his knowledge of aviation. But behind the flight tutorials and aircraft breakdowns, Dan had an obsession he couldn't shake: the mystery of D.B. Cooper. For years, he combed through flight logs, terrain maps, wind charts, and declassified FBI reports most people didn't even know existed. He recreated jump scenarios, analyzed parachute models, and dissected every tiny detail of the 1971 skyjacking. Not for fame, not for clicks, but because he truly believed he could solve the mystery. And in 2023, more than 50 years after the hijacking, his persistence finally paid off. Following a hunch, Dan tracked down a dusty storage unit in Utah. It once belonged to a woman connected to the family of Richard Floyd McCoy Jr., a name that had surfaced in Cooper theories for decades, but never seriously stuck. Most dismissed it as another dead end. But inside that forgotten storage unit, buried beneath boxes of books and keepsakes, Dan uncovered something chilling: a parachute. Not just any parachute. This one matched the exact description of the gear Cooper demanded back in 1971. An old military-style rig with strange modifications that lined up perfectly with long-forgotten FBI case files. And its origin? It traced directly back to Richard McCoy. McCoy wasn't just a random suspect. 5 months after Cooper vanished, he carried out a nearly identical hijacking. Same demands, same parachute jump, same method of escape. Suddenly, the pieces began to fit. The parachute Dan found wasn't just another clue. It was a smoking gun that linked two of the most infamous crimes in American aviation history. And if it belonged to Cooper and came from McCoy, then maybe they weren't two men at all. Maybe they were the same man. But to understand how deep this connection ran, the real question became unavoidable. Who exactly was Richard Floyd McCoy Jr.? And why does his shadow loom so large over the legend of D.B. Cooper? Richard McCoy Jr. On paper, Richard Floyd McCoy Jr. looked like the definition of the American dream. Born and raised in Utah, he was a devout Mormon, a decorated Vietnam veteran, and a skilled helicopter pilot who flew combat missions and came home alive. He was a family man, married with children, studying law at Brigham Young University. His neighbors described him as polite, quiet, and deeply religious. To anyone who knew him, McCoy was the picture of respectability. But 5 months after D.B. Cooper vanished into legend, McCoy did something that shattered that perfect image. He pulled off almost the exact same hijacking. On April 7, 1972, McCoy boarded United Airlines Flight 855 in Denver, wearing a suit and carrying a briefcase. Just like Cooper, he slipped the flight attendant a note, calmly claimed he had a bomb, and laid out his demands: $500,000 in cash, 4 parachutes, and a refueled plane bound for San Francisco. The plan played out with eerie precision. After the ransom was handed over, McCoy ordered the pilots back into the air. Somewhere over Utah, just like Cooper before him, he jumped into the night. But unlike Cooper, McCoy made mistakes. 2 of them. First, he left behind his handwritten note in the cockpit. Second, his fingerprints were found on a water glass in flight. Within days, the FBI matched those prints, tracked him down in Provo, Utah, and arrested him at home, living as though nothing had happened. The similarities to Cooper's case were impossible to ignore. Both men used a Boeing 727. Both demanded parachutes. Both escaped through the rear stairwell. Even the notes they handed over shared strikingly similar language. To many, it didn't look like coincidence. It looked like a signature. But the FBI didn't see it that way. They quickly dismissed the theory that McCoy and Cooper were the same man. The reasoning? Witness descriptions didn't match. Cooper had been described as a man in his mid-40s, with darker features and olive skin. McCoy was 29, fair-skinned, with lighter hair. The notes weren't written the same way. The handwriting didn't match. The Bureau concluded McCoy was simply a copycat. Case closed. Except maybe it wasn't. What if those differences weren't mistakes, but strategy? After all, McCoy was trained in military tactics. He knew how to disguise himself, adapt, and plan missions down to the smallest detail. If he was Cooper, would it really be surprising if he intentionally altered his appearance? A little makeup, a little age up, a change in phrasing. Even handwriting can be faked. To someone with McCoy's background, misdirection wasn't just possible, it was second nature. That thought was enough to shift Dan Grider's investigation into new territory. The differences the FBI had used to rule McCoy out began to look more like camouflage, a soldier's tricks to throw the feds off the scent. And the deeper Dan dug, the more he realized it wasn't just McCoy who might have been hiding something. It was his family, too. People who had lived for decades under a heavy silence, perhaps protecting a truth so explosive it shaped their entire lives. This wasn't just about a man and a parachute anymore. Dan had stumbled onto a secret buried within a family, and what he uncovered next had the power to rewrite everything we thought we knew about D.B. Cooper. McCoy Family Secrets. To the outside world, Richard Floyd McCoy Jr. was the perfect American, a war hero, a man of faith, a devoted husband, and a loving father. But inside his Utah home, there was something unspoken, a silence. Not fear, not denial, just an unyielding quiet. And in stories like this, silence often speaks the loudest. After hijacking Flight 855 and being captured, McCoy was sentenced to 45 years in prison. Yet 2 years later, he staged a daring escape, hiding inside a garbage truck with fellow inmates. For 3 months, he remained free, until the FBI caught up. A gunfight broke out, and in 1974, McCoy was killed in a shootout. On paper, the story ended there. But decades later, Dan Grider uncovered something that shook the case wide open. A parachute hidden away in a storage unit linked to McCoy's family. Not just any parachute, one that matched the rare, modified design D.B. Cooper had requested in 1971. That discovery drove Grider to dig deeper, reaching out to McCoy's children again and again, through letters, emails, even mutual contacts. Every time the response was the same: silence. Not denial, not anger, just silence. And to Grider, that silence felt less like rejection, as if the family wasn't hiding the truth from the world, but shielding themselves from what it might mean to admit it. Then came a second discovery, this time not in a storage unit, but in the back of a grandmother's closet in Provo, Utah. Tucked behind dusty Christmas ornaments and faded photo albums sat a canvas bundle, tied carefully with cord. When it was unwrapped, it revealed another parachute. This was no ordinary chute. The faded straps, the odd rigging, the reinforced stitching, all matched details quietly documented in the FBI's 1971 files. Details the public had never seen. Experts confirmed it. This was the same rare type of military-style parachute Cooper had used. And McCoy, an experienced skydiving instructor, knew parachutes better than most men alive. This wasn't a relic forgotten in storage. It was hidden, deliberately, carefully, as though someone knew one day the questions would return. Grider's hands shook as he examined it, because the implications were undeniable. And if McCoy's family had this chute, if it matched the FBI's files, then maybe McCoy wasn't just a copycat. Maybe he was Cooper. But just as Grider began connecting the final dots, the story took an even stranger turn. Because beyond the chutes, beyond the silence, there was something else. Something more chilling. A confession. Not written, not recorded, but passed down face to face. Whispered in a private conversation within McCoy's own family. And before that secret could come fully into the light, the FBI was forced to step back into the picture because Dan Grider's discoveries were too explosive to ignore. The FBI returns to the case. After decades of silence, the FBI was about to step back into the D.B. Cooper case, and all it took was a single viral video from Dan Grider. His discovery, the parachute hidden away in a dusty Utah storage unit, was too important to brush aside. The Bureau's response was immediate. Grider's videos had stirred a frenzy of speculation online, and suddenly, a case long thought cold was burning hot again. This wasn't just about an old piece of fabric. It was about a parachute with unique modifications. Modifications the FBI themselves had documented back in 1971. Details no other hijacking had ever shared. That made it more than evident. It made it a possible breakthrough. Agents quickly moved in, collecting the parachute and sending it to Quantico for forensic analysis. Every stitch, every buckle, every thread would be examined. And this time, the stakes were higher than ever. Because there was one other piece of evidence still lingering in the FBI's archives: the tie D.B. Cooper left behind on the plane. For years, it had been tested with only partial DNA recovered. A match had always been the dream, but no suspect had ever fit, until now. The plan, whispered about but never fully revealed, was bold. Exhume Richard McCoy's body, compare his DNA and his children's against the tie and the parachute. If it matched, the mystery would finally be solved. If not, McCoy's ghost be cleared forever. But what happened next remains sealed in silence. The results, if they exist, were never made public. As agents carried that parachute into the lab, one thing was certain: the D.B. Cooper case was no longer frozen in time. After 54 years, the FBI had one last chance, and the world was left hanging on a single, haunting question. Was Richard Floyd McCoy Jr. really D.B. Cooper? The confession. The truth had always been closer than anyone realized. It just took one man's relentless obsession to finally drag it into the light. Dan Grider had spent years chasing shadows, but he didn't stop when the parachute turned up. He knew he was circling the heart of the mystery, and if the FBI couldn't or wouldn't break through, then maybe he could. Because the real answer wasn't buried in a file. It was locked inside a family. For Shante and Rick McCoy III, the children of Richard Floyd McCoy Jr., the weight of a secret had followed them their whole lives. Their father had always been remembered as a soldier, a father, a husband, and a convicted hijacker. But the whispers about him being D.B. Cooper never went away, and for decades they denied them, until Grider came knocking. At first, the silence held. Phone calls went unanswered, emails ignored. But Grider wasn't chasing headlines. He was chasing closure. And slowly, he broke through. Not with accusations, but with one simple message: the pieces are too many. The world is about to know. You don't have to hide anymore. It took weeks before they finally agreed to speak. When they did, the truth surfaced quietly, in a way that shook the world louder than any headline ever could. Rick McCoy III was the one to say it out loud. His voice trembled as he admitted, "We never wanted to believe it. But the more we looked at everything, it's all there. He was Cooper. He had to be. Yeah, we always kinda knew it was him." They had kept quiet out of loyalty to their mother. But after her passing, the weight was theirs to set down. That confession, captured in Grider's video, exploded across the internet. Within hours, the D.B. Cooper legend had a name. Not a faceless ghost, but a man, Richard Floyd McCoy Jr. For some, it was the closure of a lifetime. For others, it only deepened the mystery. Because if Cooper wasn't just a shadow, but a husband, a father, a man, what drove him? Was it thrill, revenge, or a desperate attempt to seize control of a world slipping through his fingers? Psychologists have long suggested the Cooper hijacking wasn't just about money. It was about power, about rewriting the rules, even for a fleeting moment. And maybe that's what makes the truth harder to swallow. In the end, the legend of Cooper didn't belong to a ghost. It belonged to a man, brilliant, flawed, reckless, who chose the impossible and almost got away with it. For Shant and Rick, Speaking up wasn't about rewriting history. It was about peace, letting go of the burden they never asked to carry. For Grider, it was about proving that obsession can sometimes serve a greater purpose, uncovering the truth, no matter how unsettling it might be. The case may finally be solved, at least in the eyes of many, but like all great mysteries, its echo will never fade. Because even if we now know his name, one question lingers. What else did Richard McCoy get away with? And how many secrets still lie buried, waiting for someone obsessed enough to dig them back up? What do you think really happened? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, share it with a friend, and subscribe for more mysteries. And if you're ready for the next story, just click on the video waiting for you on screen.